We're live.
Okay, so we're back in open session here, and we have one motion coming out of closed session. So I'll read the motion and then ask for a mover and seconder. Be it resolved, the council receives the information provided from the town solicitor for information. And that's open session here. Sorry. And that staff be instructed to proceed as directed, including returning draft updated noise bylaw and road occupancy bylaw, as well as a trespass policy at our next council meeting for council's consideration. The mover and seconder for that, moved by Councillor Bernardo. Second. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, were there any questions submitted, Jennifer?
No questions this evening, Your Worship.
Okay, so we have a proclamation for National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Excuse me. Whereas in June of 2021, the federal government passed new legislation marking September 30th as a national statutory holiday to commemorate the tragic history and legacy of residential schools in Canada. And whereas the establishment of a national holiday is in response to the 80th call to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And whereas the date coincides with Orange Shirt Day, which began in 2013 and has become a symbol of remembrance to honor Indigenous children forced to leave their families to attend residential schools. And whereas the orange shirt symbol originated in the experience of Phyllis Webstat of the Siksikatum First Nation, who shared her story of how her new orange shirt was taken away from her on her first day at St. Joseph's Mission Residential School, leaving her with feelings of worthlessness and insignificance. And whereas this day will provide a way for our community to publicly commemorate and acknowledge the history and legacy of residential schools and the resilience of residential school survivors, commemoration being a vital component of the reconciliation process. And whereas Shelburne is a community that encourages and celebrates its cultural diversity, now therefore I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of council, do hereby proclaim September 30th, 2022 as National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in the town of Shelburne. Okay, so we also have a presentation this evening from our friends at Whiteman. So I can't quite see you guys are at a bit of a distance, so I'm not sure who's with us tonight, but I'll turn it over to you folks and you can introduce yourself and go through the presentation.
Sure, thank you for that. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Whiteman. And to my left is Cam Green. He's the Vice President of Customer Acquisition. Very pleased to be in front of you today. And just a quick check-in, volume's okay, you can hear us all right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect. So appreciate the time tonight to talk about our goal for the upcoming project in Shelburne. My understanding is everybody's been given the presentation. So our goal tonight is really to be here to answer any questions that you do have, but I'll just cover off some of the highlights from the presentation. I won't go into it in great detail, and that'll leave a bit more time for some of the questions, and hopefully we can provide some answers. So for those of you who are not familiar, Whiteman's been established since 1908, primarily based in Clifford, Ontario is our head office. We are currently on our 4th generation of privately owned Whiteman family ownership, and the 5th generation is integrating into the ownership as well. We have service areas from Owen Sound to Fergus and Stratford to Orangeville. Whiteman has been offering landline services and internet services in Shelburne since 2016. Our key motto for Whiteman is putting people first, and that'll be kind of evident as we talk about some of the construction and our methodology for working with the residents of Shelburne, should we get the approval to go ahead. And we've been doing that for 114 years. We've been doing fiber to the home since 2005. We started, the first town was Mount Forest, and we are currently in our 18th fiber to the home community-wide project in the town of Orangeville. We are in year 3 of that 5-year project, and 78% of our overall customer base is currently served by fiber. The business model for Whiteman is it is privately owned, as I mentioned, and all of our fiber projects are bank financed. Briefly on the technology side, we talk about fiber to the home. We really mean fiber to the home. It is from our point of presence right to the customer or business premises. So there is no last mile augmentation. Talking about the overall project impact, we have a pretty good record of working with the towns that we work with. Some of that's already sort of started in our preliminary work with Denise and with Jim and a few of the other members of the town. So far, it's been some great conversations, some great planning, and we look to continue to build on that beginning a relationship and making it a long-term one. Some of the key things with our construction, it is flush to grade. So some of the concerns in any of the residents in different areas are some of the lawn statues, as I like to call them. We don't do anything above grade, so it does blend into the aesthetic of the area. And another benefit too is with that is it doesn't require road closures, so we can work up one side of the road, down the other, so we don't need to close any road off for any amount of time. For some of those more detailed pictures and things like that, there is on our website, I believe there's a link in the package there that will give you some photos of some of the current projects we have ongoing, and you can see some of the results. And I think the biggest thing with all of this from an impact standpoint is it really comes down to communication with the residents and ensuring that there's a good open dialogue and working together. Basically, if they're not happy in the construction phase, they're not going to become our customers. So we really try to go out of our way to work with the towns that we're constructing, as well as with the residents to ensure restoration and things like that. There is a requirement from the town as far as planning, permitting, and locating resources. And we have in the past been open to working with the towns to help subsidize some of this extra demand. So we would be more than willing to explore that further once we get into the project. The big thing for us when it comes to the project itself, it is a facility-based project. We won't be using any of the other incumbents or any of the others that we can use. So even the areas that are already served by other providers, we would look to overbuild. This allows us to ensure there's a long-term investment in Shelburne, but also to make sure that we can provide a level of service and we can control that narrative for the individuals. Internet itself is really where the value of the utility comes in, and that is based solely on the output that it can do. So fiber to the home really at this point is quite limitless there how much throughput we can provide. So that's why we would look to make sure we do that ourselves. There's some information in the package about some of the studies around residential housing values, things like that. With fiber to the home in the areas, there is a track record of about a 3 to 5% increase to the value of homes, things like that, if in the communities where it's available. And to the point too, real estate agents are actually adding, fiber availability in some of their listings in some of the towns that we've done. There's an enormous economic impact to commercial and industrial sector with access to fiber. And most recently with the pandemic, the home office telecommuters, as we call it, the working from home individuals, having that good secure pipeline to the internet and access has become more and more critical. Whiteman also is a big believer in community charitable activities. You'll see in the appendix to the package, we gave it sort of a sample of some of the things we like to do. When we talk about community partnership, not only is it one of our key corporate values, but it is also something we truly believe. When we go into a town, we want to be a presence and we want to be a contributing member to that partnership. The project, just overview in general terms, it'd be about a $15 million investment for Whiteman into Shelburne's communication infrastructure. This translates to roughly 80,000 meters of fiber construction. This will serve roughly 4,300 residents plus business locations. And we were targeting in the package, you'll see late summer. I think late summer may have escaped us, but we are still looking to try to get a little bit of some of the preliminary construction done this year if we can. If not, then we will absorb that into next year. Basically, we're looking at about 1.5 years worth of construction. So anything we can do this year just sort of shortens that window of construction. And as it talks about in the package there, if we did 15,000 meters this year, that would basically allow us to wrap up the rest of the project in 2023 if we start in April to November, that sort of timeline, which is typical for us. We already talked about how it's privately funded and how we want to provide our own infrastructure. That's been covered off. And we would also look to work with the town of Shelburne, continue to work with, because I think, again, as I mentioned, Denise and her team have been fantastic so far with that communication piece. So really would look to continue that relationship, working with the development department. Cam and I have attended numerous of these sort of yearly or every 6 months economic development meetings, just to stay on top of the towns and how they're growing, just to ensure that we can work with not only the town, but also the residents to ensure that we can make sure they're covered. Requirements for the project from the town of Shelburne, first and foremost, why we're here tonight is we're looking for that signed municipal access agreement. We will have to work cooperatively together on the running line approvals and locating of the municipal buried infrastructure. And that's typically where, it puts a little extra burden on the town. So again, if there's something we can do to help offset that burden, we're more than willing to work with that. In other towns, we've done things like subsidize the hiring of a locator dedicated to just the town's fiber of their choosing, or whatever kind of model works best for the town, where we can be a helpful partner. In the package, it also highlights some of the things that we've done to date. Just again, don't want to understate the amount of help and pleasure it's been working with the town so far. Really have gone out of their way to help me personally with just the acquisition of our property on 147 Wellington Street for the POP location, where it's going to house all of our technical requirements. And really enjoyed working with Jim on some of the discussions around our pre-engineered design and things like that. So very appreciative to start this journey together, and looking forward to where it takes us. I think I'll stop there as far as a wrap up. In the package, there was some pictures. I'm a visual guy, so there's definitely some pictures there on some of the different various equipment. By no means am I the expert on any of them, but I do have a good understanding of it. And then Cam's here as well, just to talk if there's any questions around our customer acquisition or any of the community partnerships. So I think, just in the interest of time and everybody's evening, I think I'll just stop talking and leave it open to questions at this point.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave or Cam? Councilor Bernardo?
Muted. Excellent. So are you bringing the main fiber line up from somewhere, or is it already here in town?
So right now we're in discussions with getting access to the rail trail to bring the fiber up. The short term will be an interconnect from most likely from Bell that would give us the connection to 141 Front Street. That then would tie into our resource at 141 Front Street in Toronto. But the long-term goal would be to secure our own main line feeding down to Orangeville, and then eventually across to Mount Forest. That would then give us a nice secure ring for redundancy and for alternate paths.
Okay, and you mentioned once if everything is done and set up, your customer access, I guess, would be a sales pitch at that point to the different sections of the town as they're being completed, or how are you going to go about getting the fiber to the customers? I guess sales, whatever. I don't know how you want to put it, but at what point? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, at what point will the actual fiber process to the housing start?
For sure, I'll jump in and I'll let Cam bail me out when I steer it the wrong way. Typically, what we do is we will have a map in our location. So we will have right now we have a storefront location in Orangeville. Typically, being the proximity to Shelburne, we anticipate that's where a lot of the foot traffic will come from, or into our call center. We have when we put the project together, we break it down into sections, and that is communicated basically on demand for any of the sales agents, things like that. So they can, when a customer comes in inquiring about, hey, when can I turn services up? we will be able to look at the map and say, based on the progress of construction, here's where we're at, what phase we're at, and then also we can then estimate at that time rough timeline for connection.
Okay,
We kind of see it in three phases from a communication standpoint. We do it prior to say we're coming. So that drives a lot of interest in sign up. The big one for us, as soon as they see a piece of machinery and their neighbor gets hooked up, that's a huge wave of the next sign up. And then we always follow up after. So as much communication we can do the customer to answer questions. But we see it as a kind of a three-phased approach.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say to the both of you guys, thank you for the thorough presentation. I think each and every one of us around the table would say that we pride ourselves on saying that Shelburne is open for business. So when I see a $15 million investment in the Shelburne community, that should bring a smile to all of our faces. So, you know, the fact that this is going to be coming and coming soon, I think we should all be grateful, and I'm sure we are. One of the things that really caught my attention, other than obviously the investment, is the fact that, you know, you have a company that's willing to not just do what they have to do and then leave the community, but to invest back into the community. That's something that's very important to us. I think we've all experienced around the table. Sometimes we've had people come in and not necessarily give back to the community. So we received and felt the sting of that. And so I was really happy to see this in your presentation. And so when I was looking at the photographs, one of the pictures I saw was actually a check written out to a food bank for $1,000. And, you know, we just had a presentation not too long ago about the dire need of the food bank in our town. And so I'm hoping that, and they can certainly use every dollar that they could get. So I'm hoping that there's an opportunity to collaborate with them and to give back to the services that they provide here in our town.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's definitely, you know, we don't get to be around for 114 years competing with the likes of Bell and Rogers without truly looking at it as a partnership. And we do value it very highly, that community partnership, and it's important to us, right? If from every step of the way, you know, it starts with having the good dialogue and the good communication as to what that construction is going to look like, to right through to following up on making sure their services are there. We also provide our own in the building we're in right now in Hanover. It's all locally staffed 24/7 support. So that's the other big thing that we pride ourselves on. This is all local. So, you know, we have a good idea for what's going on, what the weather is actually like, and all that fun nuance, right? So definitely looking forward to that.
I think one of the interesting pieces of my portfolio is I have the donation and sponsorship portfolio. Whiteman really kind of looks at everything, but their big ones that we get direction from the family is youth and healthcare. Now we can deviate from everything, but those are kind of the pillars that they do. From bursaries to the schools. And I was one of the lucky person to hold the check for the splash pad at Shelburne. So we've already started the donations as we've kind of gone out there. So at the end of the year, I have to report to the Whiteman family on all donations that we've done and kind of group it. And one of the things they're proud of is they want to make sure they touch every territory. So every territory we are in, what have you done? So that we're not all of a sudden looking after Orangeville or looking after one. It's what have we done across the piece and make sure it's equally distributed for sure. There is a bit of uplift when we come in. So the fiber towns, they're from a budget standpoint, I'll have more for donations in Shelburne till the project's complete. So that's always fun to kind of get out and find out what's in the community as well. So
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen. It's certainly good news, and definitely look forward to a long and mutually beneficial partnership. So thanks for getting started. Excited to see what comes next. Can I get a motion just to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you for your time.
thank you, sir.
All right, any council inquiries for tonight? Deputy Mayor?
Not necessarily council inquiry, but I'll utilize the platform. I know the county has asked all lower tiers to look at their land acknowledgements and to, I guess, to see whether we could keep them in line or whether they need to be tweaked, et cetera, et cetera. I was happy to have a conversation with Debbie from the Dufferin County Cultural Resource Circle, I believe. I probably should know the name by now, but in any event, where she indicated that the land acknowledgement that we have has been vetted not only by the resource circle but by the local elders, and so I'm happy to report that from her perspective, our land acknowledgement is fitting for our area. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
That's good news. Anybody else? No. Last call. Okay. All right, on to the regular agenda then. So the first report is from our Director of Development and Operations regarding the Sand Hill Court reconstruction. So Jim, I'll let you walk us through that one.
Thank you, Mayor Mills, Council. In our 2022 budget, we do have a line item in there for a project known as Sand Hill Court reconstruction. That was estimated at a cost of $560,000 to be paid from the Canadian Community Building Fund, or formerly the AMO gas tax funding. This project has been on the town's radar for a number of years now. Last year we did do some test holes just to see what we were up against there. That did show us that the actual road base of the road is sitting in the water table, which is not good. We also did video of the storm and sanitary sewers, and we noticed there was some fairly serious deterioration of the infrastructure there. So we kind of expedited this project and included that in the RFP that went out to contractors that was prepared by Esprinet and Associates. This document was sent out to 24 contractors. 2 did attend a non-mandatory in-person site visit. 3 contractors bid, and the bid came in from Unique Builders Incorporated for $610,173.73 with our portion of the HST. And with our engineering costs of $130,000 added in, that takes us out to $742,461. So we're suggesting that be paid out of this CCB funding. As anticipated at the end of this year, the funding in that fund would be $980,847, including interest that's earned over the year, and some additional there because the Sister Street projects will be paid off. So staff is recommending that the additional costs in the amount of $182,461 also come from this fund. It does, this RFP does be in standing with our municipal procurement project. Our consultations were with Esprinet Associates. It does align with Target 3, Council's priorities for investment and funding of critical infrastructure for the future. And the Appendix 1 is the RFP and breakdown of that RFP and recommendation. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Jim? No, okay. All right, so we need a motion then to receive the report and to approve staff's recommendation to award the reconstruction to Unique Builders Inc. in the amount of $599,620 plus HST, and that we instruct staff to utilize the existing Canada Community Building Funds with a total project cost of $742,461. A mover and seconder for that, moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? That's carried. All right. Next up is a a resolution from the Heritage Committee regarding some artwork to be placed in Jack Downing Park. Councillor Fegan, I see you moved the motion at the committee. Do you want to speak to it?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is kind of an expansion on the project that the Heritage Committee has already taken on as far as putting up the Heritage murals that we've got planned for the side of the building that's right at Jack Downing Park. Going through the process, there were some concerns in regards to some of the foliage and the trees that are there and the sight lines for the mural itself, which led us to other discussions on what else could we do for visibility and also to improve the park. One of the ideas that came across was a way to use a mural type of an art piece, but expand on that. And I can't get into too much detail in regards to it because we haven't really flushed out how to pull it off. But the idea is to essentially create an art piece that is a double-sided mural, so to speak, but is three-dimensional with the framing as well as the presentation of the art itself. Now, the idea of Jack Downing Park being very tactile and very, I forgot the term that Denise used, which was very great there, very accessible for those who are either visually impaired or need to have tactile interactions. We thought this kind of an approach to an art piece that hasn't really been done before might be a really nice additive. If you take a look at the presentation, the idea where we would place this, or the most ideal location, there's a tree that has been removed at the back of the park, right by the parking lot there. And there's a little bit of a green space that we have a pole, which I believe holds a power box and power conduit right there. And we thought if we incorporate this structure, number one, it could improve the look of that essentially unsightly pole by giving a better visual, but at the same time, give a nice entrance into the park from Wood.
Okay. Councillor Buffett, you're on that committee too. Did you want to add anything?
Well, just to try to describe it maybe a little bit more specifically, I did a quick drawing that sort of looks like a tree. So it has different attachments that can be added on with those murals so that it's kind of, instead of a flat surface, it's more of an animated surface in that corner. So I think it'll be interesting to see.
Okay. Any thoughts from the rest of council or questions for Councillor Fegan or Buffett? Okay. So the motion we have as a recommendation is to receive the recommendation from the Heritage Committee regarding artwork to be placed in Jack Downing Park and to direct staff to meet with the Heritage Committee to review the request and consider next steps. The mover and seconder for that, Councillor Fegan, Councillor Buffett. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, and the next one is a request from the Heritage Committee to include an amount of $10,000 to be placed in the 2023 budget to be directed to the Heritage Committee. Is that in relation to this project specifically, or just sort of as general funding?
I think it's general funding.
Okay. Mover and seconder for that motion. Moved by Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Any discussion on that? I mean, simply this is asking that it be included in the draft budget, and then next council will consider it. But okay, there's no discussion. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, then we're on to the notice of motion from the last meeting. So Councillor Buffett made a motion that the grass behind the yards of the houses on the south side of Franklin Street to be cut on a regular basis, similar to the yards on Greenwood Street. First of all, is there a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor. All right, Councillor Bernardo.
Okay, the reason for the request was that at one point it was being cut by the town. It was a while back. We did have a conversation with the Nottawasaga conservation area. They wanted a strip of natural left, but they did not want the whole thing right to the fence where the backyard fencing is. So similar to what we have on Greenwood Street, we have negotiated with the neighborhood in Franklin to cut away from the backyard fence to within 2 to 3 feet of the bank of the Besley Creek to not have tall grass. The rest of it was to be left natural, no gardens in the back and no gates. That was the other thing that we worked out with that area, because there were gates and there were gardens starting to be put back there behind the fencing. And I believe there may still be gardens and gates back there. So anyway, for some reason, after it went on for quite a few years, and then for some reason it stopped. Now the neighborhood themselves are doing it back there. The grass is tall. They have rats, they have snakes, they have mice coming into their backyards and into their houses, and they're quite upset by the fact that that's happening. And I don't think any neighborhood should have grass that's almost beyond the knee height growing right up to their fence when it's on town property.
June, did you have any thoughts on that?
We did have a request that came in back in early June, I believe it was, from residents on Franklin about cutting that grass there. To my knowledge, it's been cut by one of the residents long-term. My understanding is that person is either elderly now at this point and can't maintain that, or has maybe passed away. So we started looking into the cutting of the grass there altogether. Nobody on staff recalls that grass being cut back there. But when we start looking into the mapping, it's not actually town property. It doesn't have a roll number that goes with it. And I think we may have to investigate with the registry office just to see if we can figure out whose property it actually is. We thought it was maybe one of the original owners still held onto that property, but it doesn't come up in the town's name at all in that section. There is some unusual property lines there for sure, between the bordering properties. Why that one little piece of property is in no man's land, I'm not really sure, but just as our normal policy is, we just don't go in on private property and cut private property just for that reason, that we'd be pulled into this in a number of different areas in town. So that's where we're at so far anyway, between Jennifer and myself. So.
Okay. So my thought, Councilor Bernardo, I guess maybe one of two things: we could defer the motion until we get a bit more information, or amend it to say that, you know, we're asking staff to investigate the possibility of cutting it. I'm kind of fine with either one.
Yeah, let's defer it, because I had long memory. I guess I've been on a little longer than some of the staff and some of the people here, but we did cut it at one time, and I know that Nottawasaga was involved with it at one point in time. And that may be back with staff that is no longer employed by us. It's been a while.
So Jennifer, help me out procedurally. We have 2 more meetings. If we defer it, if we're able to get an answer before November the 7th, we can bring it back. If not, is it then up to the next council, I guess, to reintroduce something?
That's correct. If we do not have the ability to bring forward or determine who owns that specific piece of property before the special meeting, it'll be deferred to the new council.
Okay.
Okay. Denise?
Thanks, Mayor Mills. All of this particular issue aside, through the operations review, it is actually at the will of council that the standards of grass cutting and boulevard maintenance or anything within that protocol is something that you can direct us to do. So we certainly, if there are opportunities in terms of the aesthetic that's not going to be in contravention of an environmental requirement, anything that the Nottawasaga or the Besley Drain requires us to do for protection, and it's not on private property, we certainly can look at those, and they have budgetary impacts potentially. But certainly you've identified it, regardless of whether or not we have the capacity with the time that remains to deal with it, we'll certainly look at it in terms of, operational approaches, given that you've identified some of the concerns of the abutting residences and what they're experiencing from an operational perspective.
Yeah, and to that point, it's just personally, I don't feel comfortable voting on this motion without having those two questions answered, but Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, and maybe Councilor Bernardo, because it's not only the area on Franklin, but the area on Morden as well. And I know Jim is familiar with that area as well. And so whether we could amend it at some point when it is deferred to add, and I believe that is town property there on Morden that has been cut by Jim and his staff. So we can make a friendly amendment at that point in time for that to be considered, because we know definitively that is town property.
In all honesty, it's all of our town properties, the Greenwood, the Morden, all of our properties. We have to look at how often we cut them and how low we keep the grass on them, I guess.
And so there could be an amendment to say that when it comes to town property, I guess. Anyways, I'm sure we could have that discussion once it comes back up. But let me just take this opportunity to thank Jim and his team, because when they are notified, particularly in the area in Morden, they are out there promptly cutting the grass and maintaining that area. So thanks, Jim and your team, for doing that.
Okay. All right, so we'll defer that one, and we'll follow up on that either in November or later. Okay. So the last item on the agenda is a flag raising request, and that's to recognize Islamic Heritage Month. The mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Wegner. Any discussion on that one? All in favor? It's carried. Okay, any notices of motion for this evening? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just one. I've sent the wording in to Jennifer this afternoon, but let me just read it here. It says, be it resolved that staff be directed to look at the cost of adding AstroTurf or to be installed in the pitch bowling area for the cricket teams playing at KTH Park and report back to council. And also that this report be considered in the upcoming 2023 budget discussions for obviously the next council to decide.
Okay, so that's the cricket pitch you said?
Yes, yes.
All right, so we'll consider that one at the next meeting next Monday. Any other notices? Okay. Communications, is there anything there that sparks any interest? Councillor Wegner?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Mills. I guess number 13. So it obviously doesn't necessarily pertain to the town of Shelburne. Because I've enjoyed working with all of you, of course, and I feel that everyone has been respectful around the table. However, we have seen it with other municipalities where maybe there should be some form of stronger options, I guess you could say, in order to facilitate, a potential removal of an elected official that is behaving, for lack of a better term, poorly, and not upholding the potential level of leadership that they should be. So, I just wanted to, potentially bring that up from the township of McGarry, and maybe just send a letter of support that, perhaps we kind of feel the same way that, we should be able to, wherever the potential lays for or lies for stronger options, that they actually be in place so that they could be utilized.
So you can make a motion supporting that resolution from the Township of McGarry. Is there a seconder for that motion of support? Councillor Fegan? Any discussion on that? I mean, I'm supportive of that, and I mean, the resolution is reasonably open-ended. I think it's just asking the ministry to kind of look at other options, because I mean, there are quite limited options to say the least at this point. The other part that I think is important is sort of the need for ongoing training and some sort of baseline training for elected officials. I think we've tried to do a reasonably good job this term, COVID notwithstanding, but unfortunately, I'm sure that's not the case across the province. And quite frankly, whether people like to admit it or not, the seven of us and our colleagues across the province are charged with making some pretty important decisions, and there probably should be some minimum standards in terms of training that are received by elected officials. So I'm quite happy to support that. Any other comments before I call the question? All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Anything else in communications? Okay, can I have a motion then just to receive those remaining items for information? Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? That's carried. And can I have a mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? That's carried. All right, and just before we wrap up, so as we sort of mentioned throughout the meeting, we have another meeting this following Monday on October the 3rd. I won't be at that meeting, unfortunately. That will be the last meeting of this council before the election. We are going to need to call another special meeting after the election, but before this term of council officially ends. So we'll do that on Monday, November the 7th. So I'll sort of save my more lengthy parting remarks for that meeting, I guess. But at this point, just let me say that it has truly been an honor to work with all of you. And I wish you all the best in the upcoming election. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? Carried. All right. Thank you all. Enjoy the night.